My name is Cecilia Van Donselaar of the Mary Isham Keith chapter of the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution. Today's day is October 21st, 2020, and this interview is being conducted in Columbia Falls, Montana for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. We are interviewing Sergeant Thomas W. McClain, who served in the Vietnam War. Sergeant McClain, can you tell us more about yourself, please?
Okay, you just want me to start with
Sure.
my name is Thomas W. McClain. I was born May 16, 1950 in Conrad, Montana. My wife is Charlotte Ellen McClain. Her maiden name was Brown. My wife's birthday is July 3rd, 1947. She was born in Havre, Montana. We have 3 children, Tim McClain, Andy McClain, and Charles McClain. My father's full name was George William McClain from Conrad, Montana. I can't remember his birth date. So. And my mother's birth date was born in Colville, Washington. And let's see, her first name is Irene Marie Mahoney McClain. Get that right. My brother's name is William G. McClain. I have 3 sisters, Patty, Linda, and Jeanette. Family members who served in the military would be my father, George McClain, who's a Marine Corps veteran in the Pacific. William McClain, my brother, he was in Vietnam as a crew chief on a helicopter, Chinook helicopter in 68, 69. And Tim McClain, he was in the Persian Gulf War. Let's see. To begin with today, I left home. So, the 29th of April, 1969, I volunteered for the draft. Was sent to Fort Lewis, Washington for boot camp. And passed that, and then they sent me from Washington straight down to Fort Sill, Oklahoma, which we were dressed in winter greens when we left Washington, and we got to Fort Sill. It was like 90 degrees, and we all about melted when we got there, so it was hot. And that's where I did my AIT for the artillery. And going to the AIT courses, I was approached and asked to if I wanted to be an NCO. So I enlisted in the NCO Academy at Fort Sill and did the ACL training. And they set me up, trained on 8-inch and 175 self-propelled cannon. They were about the biggest you can get in the artillery field at that time, Oklahoma. A little bit. Oklahoma surprised me. I'm a 19-year-old. I come out of off the farm up here in Montana. I'm amazed at the scenery. I couldn't figure out why the big dikes and the levees and stuff until I was there for a while. After the first big ice storm and floods and stuff, then I realized that every piece of the United States has a different type of atmosphere, I'll tell you. Anyway, spent 16 weeks doing my AIT in NCO training, and we qualified for going to Vietnam, where we had to go out and throw grenades at the local range. We went out there, and there was 2 second lieutenants ahead of us that they were trying to qualify to go to Vietnam, and they were each given 3 grenades, and the instructor, they all got in there in the bunker area for throwing grenades, and the guy, one of the first lieutenants, he pulled the pin on the grenade and went to throw it, and it bounced off his helmet and fell on the ground, and 3 or 4 grenades went flying out of the bunker, and the instructor went flying out of the bunker, and the grenade went off, killed both lieutenants. So that was my first sight of actual death in the military. It was sad, but we had to clean the mess up, so we learned pretty fast about doing that. Then I went home for a brief period. I can't remember how long. It wasn't very long. They shipped me out April 12th, 1970. I remember going to some place to get all my shots. I think I had to have 14 shots to go to Vietnam. And there was one of them that told me I went total blind for a while, walked right into a wall. I never did figure out which one was what, but they're pretty powerful stuff. And then they loaded me up on an airplane and flew me off to sunny Vietnam. And I landed in Tan Son Nhut Air Base. Got my instructions, got my battle fatigues, all that lined out. They lined me up and loaded me up on a deuce and a half, took me up to Phuc Vinh, which is the battery for Charlie Battery 6 of the 27th Field Artillery, headquarters battery, where I began to climatize, as they call it, into the Vietnam. So the third day at Phuc Vinh, I'm standing on the formation parade ground, and I'm watching these little puffs of gray and black smoke going up down around the helicopter pads. I look around and there is nobody around me. And all of a sudden a guy comes running up, tackles me, and drags me into a bunker. About the time that happened, a big explosion, and after it was all over with, we were getting mortar and rocket attack, and I had no idea what was going on. You know, a B-52 rocket had hit the telephone pole beside the parade ground. It just sprayed the whole parade ground with shrapnel. And so I was pretty lucky on that one. The sergeant that tackled me, he was the guy I was to replace. He was making sure that I lived long enough so he could go home, let's put it that way. We shook hands. He gave me his .45 and introduced me to the crew, and the battery commander had me sign for my artillery piece, and a 50 caliber machine gun, 60 caliber machine gun. I had the oldest track in, of course. The new guy always got the oldest track, oldest gun. And So began my tour of Vietnam. The first 3 weeks was diarrhea, sunburn, peeling, sunburn, peeling, sunburn, peeling, more diarrhea. Finally get acclimatized, and I go out to catch up with my gun there at base, set up at the bottom of the Black Virgin Mountain on some river right beside a big bridge. No idea, but we sat there and we shot support for what was going on up the river and whatnot. Every once in a while we get a chance to take a break and we could go down on the river and you'd watch the LSTs with they have 105s mounted in the front of them, and they would shoot beehive rounds into the banks of the river and shooting 50 caliber machine guns going up and down the river. And so every once in a while we'd get an armed guard and we'd go down and let the guys go swimming, but it was tricky. The beehive round was a pretty nasty little thing, and it would nail the leaves to the trees, and just like a bunch of little arrows. Pretty nasty stuff. We shot there for about a week in April, towards the end of April. And then we got marching orders to convoy out. A full bird colonel landed, got us all lined up for formation there, and he told us not to, and gave us a direct order not to stop for anybody on convoy. So we got to go through Saigon, the outskirts of Saigon, and there's several intersections where another ARVN convoy was coming back and forth. They were going one way, we were going another. So we had to take turns. You let one go by, and then you go. Just simple procedures. And then I found out I was lead gun, and they hadn't cleared the mines, checked for mines on the road, so I had a Jeep to follow, and away we went down the road. Just hoping and pray we weren't going to hit a landmine. That was exciting. Anyway, we get to Saigon, going through an intersection, and the Jeep went through. I let a guy go through, and then another guy got a deuce and a half, or not a deuce and a half, but a 3/4 ton mess truck, pulled right in the middle of the intersection and stopped. ARVN mess truck. And I wasn't going to wait. I drove over the back of the 3/4 ton mess truck, pushed it out of the way, and kept going. So the first night, the convoy pulled into the big red one further up the road, and 2 MPs showed up and arrested me. And the next morning they took me down to the big palace in Saigon there, and dressed me up in military greens. They gave me a clerk for a lawyer. I found out he'd been 2 semesters in law school, so they figured he was just smart enough to be my lawyer. And I was brought up on charges of destruction of government property for running over the 3/4 ton mess truck. Well, they drug me up. I mean, we're talking with ARVN generals, a lot of brass up on stage, the whole 9 yards. And, I'm beginning to wonder what's going to happen to me when the colonel that gave me a direct order, he flew in, landed, and cleared me of all charges. He got me out of that mess, and he shook my hand and asked me if I wanted to join his outfit. So he finally found somebody that could follow orders. So, and you know, I said, what would I be doing? And he said, well, you'll be a door gunner on a gunship flying for my protection. And at the time, the life expectancy of a door gunner on a gunship was like 5 minutes in the air. So I politely told him no, that I'd been trained on the 8-inch and 175, and I prefer to go back to my battery. Thank you anyway. Thank you for getting me out of trouble. And so I catch up to the battery at I think it was Loch Nin, LZ Wade, and we were just getting set up there. When you pull in, you pull into a field. The engineers had been there long enough to load or build a berm and put out some concertina wire and stuff. So it was just sandbagging and trying to get all the ammo and powder under cover, and then ourselves under cover, which after a while it got to be routine. You spend a lot of time throwing sandbags, working. And at that place we 2 guns on, 2 guns off. So if you're off, I was volunteered for Sergeant of the Guard. Hard to sleep that night anyway, so I pulled a lot of Sergeant of the Guard my whole tour in Vietnam, where I messed up once, and I come out of the command bunker about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I forgot to shut my flashlight off coming out the door, and I heard a couple mortar rounds leave a tube, and one of them landed in the back of a 5-ton truck about 10 feet from me, which when it went off, the truck driver had left his tailgate at a 45-degree angle, which 90% of the shrapnel went ricocheted off the tailgate, and over the top of my head were 3 big holes in the tailgate. A couple went behind me and one went in front of me, but the concussion picked me up, threw me about 20 feet across the road, rolled me around there. And by the time the second round landed, I was in my buddy's bunker. It was Sergeant Ken Wright. We had gone through AIT and officer training together at Fort Sill, and we were lucky enough to get the same battery in Vietnam. And he had a 8mm movie camera that he come out the next day. We took pictures of where I was standing and what the back of the 5-ton pickup looked like and where I'd landed. So, but that part of these movies got messed up when he got back home, but was a bummer. But he managed to salvage 4 videos of us in Vietnam shooting the guns, and you can see them at www.quanloy.org under Charlie Battery, 6th to the 27th, and it'd be Bill Posey, Sergeant on Gun 3. He's got a lot of pictures in there, and Ken Wright was Sergeant on Gun 1. He's got the 4-part videos, which actually shows myself and my crew shooting. So it's pretty nice and neat to look at it. That hopefully it'll last forever, but you never know. let's see. Got that in there. I'm gonna have to go through some of it. After Ellsby Wade, we got marching orders to go to Buda up on the Cambodian border. And unbeknownst to us at the time, so we all loaded up in convoy. We had 2 quad 50s and 2 twin 40s for protection on the road, and they stayed with us. But unbeknownst to us, we were the first ones that had been on that road since the French had left back in 1950s. We made it. Engineer convoy coming behind us got ambushed, and so we ended up in a field beside the Special Forces A-Team fort, big compound. And we pulled in there and just started shooting. We used our spades to drag up to some small berms and stuff. The field was full of spider holes. Spider holes where they were the North Vietnamese that dig underground, and they pop up in a hole and shoot at you and look at you, observe. And so we found a few of those and filled them in and covered things up. And during the time of pushing the berm up and stuff, we uncovered a whole batch of snakes. There were snakes all over the place for a while there. So everybody was kind of tiptoeing. And it was a pretty exciting experience. We kept getting sniper fire every once in a while. Morning and night we'd get mortar rounds right at formation in the morning or evening mess. You got so you kind of got used to it. You just kept your ears open and kept listening. And if you heard anything, you automatically hit the ground. You know, it was second nature. That boot up, it was Highway 13, if I remember right. There was a small airstrip right there with a unit of 155s that were shooting. And between us and we had my battery had all 4 guns were 175s, and all 4 guns shot night and day. We'd get resupply when we could, but when we did get resupply, we just shot all the rounds and then waited for more resupply, which they had to fly it in with Chinook helicopters because the roads were closed. But we just kept shooting and filling sandbags and digging in, and eventually it turned into a pretty decent place. But Boot Up was one of the rougher places, you might say, because of the getting closer to the enemy. After a while, filling sandbags and daily routine and stuff, at one of our NCO meetings, I was unfortunate enough to pull the short straw, which I had to go out in from the mortar rounds that didn't go off that the enemy shot at us. They were laying all over us. I had to go out and pick them up and dispose of them. So I got 7 mortar rounds that I'd already had a tree picked out a big, big, huge tree. And I'm from Montana, and I'm saying this thing was probably 6 foot in diameter or better. So I put all 7 mortar rounds around that tree and used a stick of C4 on each round to dispose of the ordnance. And I'm thinking the tree is solid. Well, when I touched her off, she pretty much went into orbit, and I ended up blowing about half the thatched roofs off the nearby village, which made the village chief pretty mad. So we had to buy him half a pallet of tin for his roofs. But we got rid of the sniper. We weren't getting any more snipers from that area. And the tree branches and pieces of ladder and stuff come floating down. And so, yeah, it was big, the big fruit bats. There's 4 or 5 of them. But so they decided that they didn't need me anymore to dispose of the ordnance that didn't go off. One way of getting out of things, I guess. We had quite a time there. They'd fly us in SP packs. You'd get three meals of sea rations a day. And after they got the road opened up, a 3 weeks, then Mess Daddy and the mess hall crew started showing up with hot meals. But it was a long time there. It was just eating sea rations 3 times a day. And we were getting, our jungle fatigues were getting pretty rotten from finally getting resupplied in. But we worked night and day. When you were done shooting, you tried to get food in you and sleep, grab an hour, maybe 2 hours of sleep before the resupply would come in. And then you get resupplied, you unload all the rounds, put them in the bunkers, maybe grab another hour of sleep before a fire mission would come on. And once they found out we had ammo again, it was continual shooting. Port observers would call us up all the time. So we just support for the sky troopers that were in Cambodia. The 175s would shoot 30 miles. So we were covering quite a large area. There's a dispute on how far a 175 would shoot, but we found that on a good day we could reach out there about 30 miles, somewhere 26 to 30 miles away. We did pretty good. My gun was brought up. We had a fire mission where there was a cave that they found where you could drive a 1.5 deuce into. And they gave us the fire mission, and we fired the first round, hit right in the center of the cave entrance, closed it off. The second round we put a time delayed fuse, which landed about 20 feet further ahead, and the round don't go off until it's about 20 feet underground, and then it goes off. And we did 3-round fire mission and completely closed the cave and everything off. The forward observer was very, very impressed with us. we were hoping to get a citation on it, but I never did hear anything back on it. Rudolph was, we stayed there until the monsoon season started coming in. And we had to stay for the monsoons. We couldn't go anywhere. The clay and mud, about 3 foot deep, rained all the time. If you did get a fire mission, you get about 3 rounds and then have to relay the gun because you just shot out of your aiming stakes. The recoil would push back. So it was a pretty messy situation. As sergeant, I lucked out on, I had a mountain yard gal with, I'd go and shoot the big rats that were around. I'd shoot 2 or 3 big rats and a couple packs of cigarettes, and I could get my laundry done for a week or better. So that worked out pretty nice there. One time myself and another sergeant were invited to the village to have dinner with an Arvin sergeant. After talking it over with the XO and battery commander, they said, well, it'd be good for political and whatever. But as it turned out, we both ended up with food poisoning. And at formation the next morning, we both passed out standing at formation. 24 hours later, we're coming back around to the world again, so we knew what was going on. It was pretty nasty stuff. And that was, we decided we weren't going to do that anymore. But, yeah, the monsoon season got over with, and we convoyed back to Wade, Elsie Wade, out of Loch Nin, Anlock area. And while we were gone, the Army engineers had come in and dug big pits for us to put all our bunkers in underneath, further underneath ground. So we had to, again, fill sandbags and take down our old compound area and rebuild, fill in sandbags, fill night and day. My brother had sent me Woodstock tapes. I had 2 tapes of Woodstocks, and I had my speakers set up, and I got a lot of sandbags filled by playing the Woodstock tapes, and anybody that came by, they had to have a shovel and started filling sandbags. And there was quite a few people that liked to listen to the music, so I had a lot of sandbags filled. It worked pretty good for us. And in between fire missions, pulled sergeant in the guard all the time. One morning at formation, my assistant gunner, he had to use the latrine over the berm, so I excused him from formation. He went over the berm, and he come flying back and jumped in a bunker, M60, opened up, and he just spraying lead all over the place out there. The NVA had come in and opened the Constantina wire up. It was wide enough, it was about a half a football field wide. Spread it wide open. Yeah, we instantly went on alert, and we killed 2 zappers and captured 2. They were in the bunkers, powder bunkers, trying to set their charges. And we put two of them as prisoners, and I don't know, the South Vietnamese come in helicopter and picked them up to interrogate them. And that wasn't a pretty sight, let's put it that way. They took them up in the air, and after the interrogation, one went flying, and then pretty soon the other one went flying too. So, but there was nothing you could do about that kind of stuff. It was, their main objectives back in those days was to find out information, and then they were a little reluctant to rehabilitate enemy, as we watched. We were there at McV was about a quarter mile away from us on the nice airstrip there. We had Thanksgiving. They flew in a C-124 and rolled out a cart of ice cream. So we had ice cream for Thanksgiving and a hot meal, which was good. A few donut dollies came in. We played games and stuff. You know, it's just after 3 months in country, and the first round-eyed girls we'd seen, so it was pretty special. 19-year-olds. The McV compound was up close to the airstrip there, and they had a big tower. The whole bottom of it is about 12 by 16 solid rock bunker, and it was filled with the old French landmines, and somehow it got set off, and the explosion put the tower into orbit. We had several guys hurt with rock wounds, sucking chest wounds, broken arms. It was a pretty nasty affair. That's where a quarter mile away, there's a lot of the steel and stuff from the tower landed in the battery area and stuff. We had several wounded. McV compound, they lost over 50. Wiped out, 80 some wounded. So it was devastating for the McV Marines down there. Pretty messy deal. And every once in a while, the mortar rounds, sporadic, nothing like it was at Budock. And then after that, we, let's see, where did we go? I believe we went to Mattil in November 70. So fire support base, it was a hip shoot, is what they call them. We just drove out in the jungle into a meadow, set up and started shooting, and we stayed there for like 3-4 weeks, filling sandbags and shooting, and we got an order from the battery commander to tear down early because he wanted to leave in the morning to go back to LZ Wade for be back in time for a IG inspection. Well, that evening we were sitting there, a fellow friend of mine, he was new in the country, Jack Fareed, he was sitting beside me on the track. We were eating supper and the mortar round went off down by the outhouses, and the second one went off somewhere close to me. I don't know, I was already on the ground, and finally come to find out Jack got hit. But the second round went off, he got hit in the stomach. So I got him best I could patched up and got the medic to him and took care of him. And then I went to the MDF. There's a big truck with all the radios and radar equipment in it, and they could tell which way the rounds were coming in, the mortar rounds. And by the time I got there, holy heck broke loose. The rounds started coming in all over, and I bailed out of the truck there, and I crawled underneath with two other guys, and the front tire went flat. Front tire went flat, and one of the guy's legs got about halfway pinned under there, and I told the other guy just to dig him out and then get away from the truck because it was a target. And they were pretty shook up. I come up under there, and I started low crawling back to my gun. In the process, I come across the battery commander low crawling back to the only bunker we had. It was his, that hadn't been torn down. So sorry about that. It was another messy situation. All our bunkers had been torn down. We were burning our trash and everything through the sandbags and stuff in the pits, and some of the guys ended up in the chow pits, leftover grease pits. Everybody, well, there was 4 of us that got wounded that night. Several Arvins were killed. We had 2 platoons of Arvins with us at the time, and an Arvin cook was my buddy, and everybody gave me a bad time about it, but hey, he was a good cook, and he'd cook, take my sea rations and mix it with his finesse, and made a pretty decent meal. So he was a good friend. When he walked around all the time holding hands. That's the Asian sign for friendship. So, but I was always getting teased about it. But that night, I was asked to build an arrow using sandbags and ammo cans with diesel to make an arrow out over the berm pointing the direction of where all the incoming was coming from. And I got out to lit the point arrow about 100, 200 yards out in the field, and I was low crawling back, and the guys lit the other ends of the arrow. At the same time I lit the lead point, which lit me up, so I had to crawl through the firelight back to the perimeter, which everybody was locking and loading, and yeah, it was a pretty scary situation. I had told my little Arvin cook what I was going to do. We could pretty much communicate, so he knew what was going on. And he told the Arvin platoon guys not to shoot me, which probably saved my life, because everybody was in high tense, nervous, locking, loading, and shooting wildly. And, pretty scary situation. Then we did a big triangle or rectangle to get the medevacs to come in, and they would come in until they got the all clear. In the meantime, a Snoopy gunship come over the top of this and sprayed the jungle with bullets. It was just like red streams coming up, just hitting the jungle all around. Pretty impressive, but they all shot in the wrong direction, so it didn't help much. I don't know, maybe it did, I don't know. It was one of those scary nights that we finally got two of the guys. So Jack Vereen was the worst. We loaded him up on a helicopter, and some of the Arvins were pretty well shot up. And our medic flew out with him on the chopper, and that was the last we seen of the medic. So the three other guys were patched up with they had arms and legs, shrapnel wounds. It was quite a tussle trying to get them later on for their Purple Hearts. But we never did catch up to the medic again. He was short, so he was on short time. He was ready to go home, so he went back with Jack. 30 years later, I find out that Jack Vereen survived, been in contact with him. And so he's part of our group, which is kind of a relief. He was part of my crew. Find out he made it. You just don't know. They don't tell you. Have no idea. I don't know. When I talk about a turkey shoot or a hip shoot, it's you have about 100 guys. You got the 4 guns, your communications, your FDC, and what little support. And you end up with, we ended up with our twin 40 Dusters, 2 of them in 2 quad 50s, which they were our lifesavers when out there in the field. It's kind of hard to imagine you go out in the middle of the wilderness to us, the jungle, and with a small group like that, like at Mattil, and when the enemy attacks, it makes you think about back in the Wild West, and the wagon trains are all circled up and the Indians start coming in. It kind of gets you excited. Sergeant Ken Wright, he loaded his 8-inch with a half-second time fuse and a charge 5 green bag, and went out, watched on the road because there was information that there was an enemy tank in the area, and he figured that he would do his best to stop it with that, which thank God they never showed up. But you never know. The whole time the tension is so tight, you're wound up like a 10-day clock. And then, but anyway, after the next morning, got everything cleaned up and convoyed back to Wade. And stayed there for a while. It was nice to have a hot meal again and you know, get relaxed a little bit. Then, I think it was about a month after that, we decided they moved us to LZ Haymaker, which is another place we have out on the road, out on Highway 13, close to the Cambodian border, somewhere up in there. We set up there, the ground was white sand, and so you had scorpions and sand crabs. Nasty. You always had to watch out for those. And, had a little green snake go in my bunker, and unbeknownst to me, somebody threw a grenade in there and killed the snake, but it messed up my speakers and my tape player. So I had to, my next time off, get a 2-day R&R and go back to the PX and buy a new speakers and tape player. Haymaker was the headquarters, and Haystack was where we were. Another place out in the middle of nowhere, all 4 guns. They come in, push a berm up for us, and we start shooting. We get a couple ground attacks, surges. One time we had Blue Max come in and shoot covert gunships. They come in and shoot along the jungle line. They shoot rockets and M40 or miniguns, spray the area in the middle of the night. So you heard them, but you didn't know where they were, and they'd light up everything. And of course, on a good one good attack, I was in my bunker and I was making a tape to send home to my folks, and just laying there talking and in a nice evening, quiet, nothing going on. And about that time, they hit us, and I just threw my mic down and went yelling, got my guys up on the berm, and got them shooting. And a lot of guys panic, and the only way to get them out of their reserve, freeze. So you get them on the berm and you tell them to shoot. Just take your M16, shoot. Don't even worry about it. Just shoot. And pretty soon they're up there, they're blasting away, and they're actually working. I've had them curl up in a fetus position and just wailing, worried about they're not going to make it and all that. You just got to get tough with them and kick them and make them. Once they start shooting, they come out of it back to teamwork. The ones that don't, they get shipped back to headquarters battery for more useful there. Then somebody else will come up and take their spot. They had a lot of responsibility as a sergeant to try to keep things going. But as I was saying, that quad 50s beside us, my bunker there, they opened up and they says, shooting away like crazy, and I come back, and I had some grenades in my bunker, which I grabbed, and I noticed the tape had stopped playing, so I just flipped it, turned it back on, and left, and divvied up the grenades and whatnot, and we're all just throwing grenades and having a good old time. And twin 40s, and we're just racking away, and quad 50s. It was pretty noisy, and I didn't realize that I made a new tape for my folks, and it was all nice, quiet, peaceful. Evening, just sunny Vietnam, nice, easy talk and stuff. And then I took the combat tape and I sent it to my brother. I thought I got the tapes mixed up, and back home on the farm there, all the neighbors would come down and listen to my tapes from Vietnam and visit with the folks. The only time in my life I ever got a letter from my dad. He said if I ever send a tape like that home again, he was going to come over there and kick my butt. It's pretty upsetting for him. I hadn't realized that my brother was wondering why he'd sent me a tape like that, and so I finally got everything scored away there, but it was a pretty rough one. But after a while, you live on the edge. You just got to go for it. You can't do anything but do what you can. Just keep going. Some guys, you couldn't get them out of the bunker. After a while, if they didn't want to do their job, we just sent them back to the rear, bring in new guys and get them broke in, and just to have a crew that would function in a combat zone. Not everybody can do it, but that was Haymaker is where I left, and my Sergeant Ken Wright, we both left Vietnam from there. I did an R&R in Australia. That was a nice week of I get to water ski in front of they call that big seashell-shaped place down there on Sydney, Australia, with the orchestra area or something. Can't remember what it was. Beautiful, beautiful place. Went on a 50-foot sailboat for a day. Got to water ski and stuff in the sound there. That was fun, relaxing. But I was happy to leave Vietnam. There was one time when we were shooting the 8-inch, we had a danger close mission where our sister battery up the road about a mile and a half away, we were getting overran, and we were shooting a charge 5 green bag on the 8-inch, where it's a 200-pound round of TNT, and the recoil when you shoot, the impact would raise the dirt and stuff on the ground a good 1.5 to 2 feet high, and it stung when you're riding the gun. It stung so bad after 5 rounds, our nose ears were bleeding. And after 15 rounds, the three of us on the gun, we couldn't shoot anymore. We were totally out of it. The impact was so hard, it ripped the seams out of our fatigues. It literally just ripped it left us in shreds. And we couldn't shoot anymore. We had to get another gun going to finish off the mission, but that one hurt really bad. It's unbelievable. The round would leave the tube and break the sound barrier at the same time, and the concussion was so intense that, like I said, the three of us riding the gun, we were after 15 rounds, we couldn't hardly walk. We were flopping around. So that was you don't want to do that ever again. No, that one hurt too much. Well, there was a time towards my end of my tour, about February of '71, I got my draft notice. I was to report to Butte, Montana for my physical. They wouldn't let me go. I tried. I was trying to do anything to get out of there by then. The last month we were moved back to boot up again. And if I remember right, it could be different, but they closed the roads down again, so they needed a sergeant to resupply the battery, and I was lucked out enough to draw the straw, and so I went to Newibara, LZ Buttons, and there was a big British Air Cab base camp, and our sister battery, B battery, was their base camp headquarters. So that's where I stayed there, and I resupplied, hooked up to the Chinook helicopters, all the resupply for the battery for about a month. I had another guy with me, and we'd roll out of bed early in the morning and get all our slings and everything all lined up, everything ready to go. We'd drive by the Connex hut places, and they were full of ice. These Connexes, which you didn't see much ice in Vietnam. And I would help myself to 3 or 4 big blocks of ice and wrap them up and send them to the battery. That made everybody out there really happy because they had ice for their beer. Yeah. I'd send a half a pallet of beer a month. Stuff like that I was able to get whatever I could get my hands on and get requisitions for. It worked out pretty nice. And it was a relief to be off the guns. But I went back to the battery, and shortly after that, the guy that was with me, a young lad from North Dakota, he kind of lost his cool and used a CS grenade into the command bunker. He went out to his bunker and committed suicide, M16. It was one of those things you don't understand. He didn't say nothing to me. He didn't, there was no warning. It's they reach a certain point, I guess, and to do that with it. not going home. I don't know. But it was a year of lack of 20 days early out, so that helped. I was really happy. When we were at Budop, they had found a big arsenal in Cambodia called Rock Island East, and we were the closest airstrip where they would gather up and sling in all the captured ammo and weapons and dump them off at us, and so that made us a hot spot. The NBA weren't very happy about losing their arsenal in Cambodia. So it was pretty hot and heavy. They lobbed mortar rounds at us all the time. Some of them got close, some of them landed in the areas, but most of the time we were undercover. You know, you learn to go from bunker to bunker. You don't spend that much time out in the open. And you just took your chances. But, I ended up, I had a AK-47. That was one of my weapons of choice when I was pulling guard duty. About 4 o'clock in the morning, the guards would be a little lax and trying to fall asleep. So I'd grab my AK and I'd go out behind the bunkers and shoot 3 or 4 rounds. And the sound of the AK-47 is distinguished. You can't forget it. And that would bring all the guards up in bug-eyed and alert. And about the time I had to go get the officer of the day to go inspect my guards, you know, I was always pretty good on. I always had a good guard duty. It worked out pretty good in the end. I never told anybody until I was ready to leave about that one, but it woke them up, kept them going. It was the Marines would come in every once in a while. The long-range patrols would stop, and we would. They would set up on our berm and pull guard duty for us, which, as Sergeant of the Guard, I let those guys alone. I told them what was going on and what was happening, and just, I've got my guards. Don't worry about it, guys. You've been out there for 2 or 3 weeks. Relax. Get cleaned up and take your time. Don't worry about it. So that helped. We kind of took care of those guys too. They were supposed to be pulling guard duty for us, but they give them a break. So they get chance to wake, chance to sleep. Little things like that makes the time go by faster, and you don't get used to sleeping. As you'd call an 8-hour sleep. It's unheard of. You just didn't get it. But
May I ask you if do you have some words of wisdom that you would like to offer to future generations?
I can't hear you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes. Do you have a message that you would like to send to the future generations as a result of your experience, what you would say?
Well, basically, I went to war for my country. I served my country. I would come out honorably, and if you ever get the chance, Military career is very exciting. Hopefully you'll never have to go through a war, but you meet a lot of really interesting people. Your duties, most of the time, if you pick it right, you can retire, or you can do your 4-year term, get an education, get a good start in life, and I recommend at least a 2-year stunt for men and women, just to learn teamwork and discipline, and to honor your country. That's what I got.
Well, I want to thank you so much for allowing us to interview you today, and thank you so much for your service to our country.
Well, thank you. I'm proud to have served, and I'm even more proud that people will stop and thank me, because true Americans will do that.
Absolutely, yes. We know that you didn't get all the thanks you deserved at the time, but hopefully you're getting to realize more now how much you are appreciated.
Yeah, well, you know, it was a tough year. I come home, I got spit on, called baby killer, all kinds of rude gestures, and for the first 10 years at least, I didn't, you know, my uniform went in the back. I grew my hair long, but it took quite a while. I was pretty disappointed in the treatment that us the Vietnam vets got coming home. Still don't understand it wasn't us as men and women fighting. Well, it wasn't our fault. We did our job. So why they would, and some of these people are in our Congress and leading this country, or trying to, that we're the ones that are literally causing problems back in those days. So think about it when you choose to vote. That'd be all I got to say on it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope everything turns out all right. So.
Thank you, Sergeant McClain.